Okay, everyone, so we'll go ahead and get started. I want to welcome you all today to our event, Getting Hired at the Community College. This is the second event in a three-part series on exploring careers in teaching at a community college that's been organized through CIRTL, and the NSF includes Aspire Alliance. So I just wanted to welcome you here on behalf of the CIRTL Network. My name is Shannon Patton, and I'm here to provide tech support for today's event. So please, if you have any technical issues during this session, you can put them in the chat box to get my attention, or you could also email info@cirtl.net, and we can help you out through that mechanism. So we've already been having most of you introduce yourselves in the chat, but if you haven't seen where that is yet, there's a little purple arrow in the bottom right corner. You can click that arrow and it'll expand the tabs for you, and that first tab is the chat box that you can type into. Since some of you may be new to CIRTL, just wanted to give you a quick overview of what the CIRTL Network is all about. So CIRTL is the Center for the Integration of Research, Teaching, and Learning, and we're a network of 37 universities in the US and Canada working to make the science more diverse by changing how they're taught. That's kind of the essential part of our mission. How we go about this is we are focused on teaching STEM graduate students and postdocs about inclusive, evidence-based teaching and learning so that they can become both excellent researchers and teachers. And a lot of folks might already be getting practice at becoming great researchers at their universities, but sometimes some supplemental instruction on how to become great teachers can really help out. So if you're interested in learning more about the CIRTL Network, you can learn about our member institutions, our approach to STEM education, and our full range of programming at CIRTL.net, our website, including we do have an upcoming third session of this event series that you might be interested in if you haven't already signed up. So we're excited to bring this event to you. The community college space is it's great for students to think about community college positions as one of their future faculty opportunities if they're interested in teaching. I did want to bring up that because we have so many participants that we're expecting to join today, we do want to sort of funnel questions through the chat window. So rather than trying to come on camera or raise your hand or things, we do ask that you put questions into the chat. You can feel free to do that throughout the session today, but we'll also pause at certain points in time and specifically ask for questions. So please ask whatever's kind of coming to your mind. So I think with that, just want to say welcome again, and I'll hand the event off to Katie Dixie and Jess Craig and our speakers.
Thank you so much, Shannon. Hi, everybody. Echoing the welcome here. Before we jump into it, I want to ask a couple of questions. And my first question for you is, did you attend the first event in this series? This is a three-part series. The first event was Introduction to Teaching at Community College, which was held last month. So I am going to put up a poll, and down on the bottom of the screen there, it should give you some instructions. Let's see. All right, we've got about half and half, it looks like. Awesome. Well, for those of you who were with us the first time, welcome back. And for those of you who are joining us for the first time, welcome. We're so happy that you could join us, and we're so excited to talk to you about these wonderful career options. We also have a second question, which is, are you planning on applying to a community college job, or maybe you're applying now? And yes, no, or maybe you're not sure. So it seems like a good mixed bag again. A lot of people who are definitely thinking about it or at least applying right now. And there are several people who maybe aren't sure, which is great. So maybe this will help sway you towards maybe wanting to apply. A couple notes, but that's all right. This is where you get information, so who knows. Okay. So I want to introduce myself first before we jump into it. My name is Katie Dixie. I represent the NSF Includes Aspire Alliance, which I will talk about in a minute. I'm the program coordinator for the California Regional Collaborative run out of UCLA. I also have Kankana here with me.
Hi everyone. I'm Kankana Ghoshal. I am an aspire to teach intern at UCLA.
Thank you. So Kankana is going to be helping me monitor the chat and take down all of your questions. So we also have Shannon, of course, who is here as our wonderful tech support from CIRTL. She is such a great help, and so if you have any technical problems, please contact her in the chat and she'll try to help you out. So a little about this series. Like I said, it's a three-part series where we have panels of current and former faculty at community colleges who are going to be talking about basically using their expertise and their experience in talking about community college and what it's like to teach there, as well as their experience in getting hired there. So the previous webinar that we had was the Introduction to Teaching at Community College. Now that is available, is recorded and available to view on YouTube. So I'm going to post a link to the series in the chat box. And this is a link to the previous webinar. So if you'd like to watch it, feel free to. We also have one coming up next month. Please save the date because it's going to be a great event with a great panel talking about diversity, equity, and inclusive teaching and what that means in community college. A little bit about Aspire. So Aspire is a national alliance that really grew out of this, out of data that came in that students from underrepresented groups were leaving STEM majors in higher education at disproportionate rates to other students. And so for this, there were a lot of national initiatives that were launched from this, and Aspire is one of the things that came out of it. So Aspire works with the Association for Public Land Grant Universities, the APLU, and CIRTL in several different ways. So there's three main goals. One is to help prepare STEM faculty to be more inclusive and effective in their teaching practices, to be a bit more well, equitable and inclusive. We also try to diversify the faculty through recruitment and hiring, as well as just kind of getting the word out about this career options available for teachers, and to create institutional change to make it a bit more welcoming and really value the inclusivity and diversity. So out of this, there's kind of three different arms. We are part of the regional collaborative arm. So there are three regional collaboratives, one in California, one in Iowa, and one in Texas. And what we do is we work with four-year institutions and two-year institutions, so community colleges and universities. And together, we try to work towards two main goals. The first of which is trying to increase the number and diversity of graduate students and postdocs, so future faculty like yourselves, interested in pursuing careers at a two-year college, where a lot of these students from underrepresented groups are getting their first taste of STEM. A lot of people get their first taste of STEM at community college. So we do this through putting on a couple different events. We have internships and practicums that we create. We also do workshops and trainings and informational meetings. And so this is where this webinar comes in. We want to share with you and get the word out there about all of the career options available to teaching-focused, like-minded people like yourselves. So that's enough about me. Let's talk about our panelists. So we have three wonderful panelists with us here today. I'm going to have them introduce themselves and talk just very briefly about how they ended up teaching at a community college, what their pathway was like. So we'll start with Sacha.
Okay. I think I'm back on. Yes. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you're watching this from. It's good morning for us in Southern California here. I hope you're all having wonderful weather like we are. If you're not, I'm sure it's coming soon. As I mentioned, my name is Sacha Moore, she, her, hers. I have 2 roles in a community college and a community college district. I have been a professor of English full-time in the Golden West College in Huntington Beach for 12 years. And I also, how funny, I'm noticing that it says Pierce College somehow underneath my information. That is not correct. I'm a professor of English at Golden West, but the other part of that is I'm the district coordinator of equity, inclusion, and compliance for the Coast Community College District. I think I've got another title in the midst of doing this. So I already have 2 full-time jobs. I'm good on that front. I got to this point because I was a community college student myself, had a really fantastic experience as a student in that position, especially as a first-generation college student. And no worries, Katie. And, you know, I wanted to kind of be on the other side of that. I really make the kind of impact on my students that my community college professors had made on me. And so I went through the typical process, which is a little bit of time as a part-time instructor at 2 separate colleges. I then had a 1-year full-time temporary position at the college where I then 1 year later got a full-time tenure track position. So I think I did that in reverse order, but that was my path to getting here, and I'm happy to be here with all of you today.
Awesome. Thank you, Sasha. I'm happy that you're here with us too. Loni, how about you next?
Okay, hello everyone. I am currently teaching at Mount San Antonio College. That's in Southern California as well. I've been here 20 years and I have served as department chair long time ago. Let's see, in addition to teaching, I am also the campus outcomes coordinator. So if you hear about learning outcomes, that's kind of in my territory right now. And prior to teaching full-time, I also taught part-time at the local community colleges. Yeah, in biology. Yes. That's about it.
Thank you, Loni. We're so happy you could join us also. And Jamey.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? I guess not.
Yep.
Oh, you heard me.
You.
Okay, good. Okay, I wasn't sure with these earphones. It's very odd. All right. Hi, my name is Jamey Anderson, and I am currently a faculty member in chemistry at Santa Monica College. I have just finished a term and a little bit more as department chair here at Santa Monica College of the physical science department, which includes physics, chemistry, and engineering. And my path to being a community college faculty member and sometime administrator has been started back in 1995 when I was still in graduate school. I kind of snuck away 1 semester and taught a night class at a local community college. And it was so much fun that I totally stopped looking for postdocs at that point. And did what I wanted to do, which was look for teaching positions in the local area. So I taught contract positions for about 2 years at UCLA and at other community colleges. And then eventually got hired in 1998 here at Santa Monica College. Since being here, I've been involved in leadership in the department as well as in the academic senate, and been involved in developing hiring practices and more recently equitizing our hiring practices here at Santa Monica College.
Awesome, thank you. So we've kind of broken up today's panel into 3 different sections. The first being about navigating the job market, how you find jobs, things like that. Preparing your application materials is the second part, and then the interview process is the third. So please, as we're going through, post any questions in the chat box. We'll be keeping track of it. Kankana will be helping us with that. And there'll be time after each section to answer some of these relevant questions. We may hold off on some questions that you have that might be addressed in the next part. And then at the very end, we'll have time for any other questions that you didn't get a chance to get answered. So we'll do our best to answer as many questions as we can. So for our part 1, navigating the job market, maybe this one Loni can start us off on is, what advice do you have about starting as an adjunct versus trying to get a full-time position without community college experience. Is there a difference between the adjunct and full-time application process?
Okay, for the first question, I would definitely recommend that everyone start as an adjunct, simply because number one, you need to know what it's like to teach at a community college. The student population is so diverse. You know, you're gonna have people of all age group, people of all ethnicity, and different level of experience. Some of them don't want to be there, some of them want to be there, but they're very tired because they're working 2 jobs, you know, etc. So it's not like what a lot of people expect. But having said that, I think a lot of people enjoy that diversity, that mix. And so just teaching one class will give you exposure to what to expect. And also, you know, the first time you teach anything, the preparation is huge. You're gonna have to sort out your material. You're gonna have to work on your homework, and you know, what kind of test question you're gonna write. You know, all this stuff. I can't imagine creating more than one prep. We call it a prep, right, for each course. So trying to do that for one class is a lot of work up front. But once you do it, then you kind of revise and what, you know, modify according to what your experience is in the classroom. And so teaching just one class, you will have some time to do that. And then the next time you teach it, you just modify. So it's a lot easier. So it's like a stair step. You know, teach one class first. If you like it, continue. And then as you teach more and more, you get a better feel for what to expect. Number two, I would also recommend that you start out teaching the subject. Of course, within any subject, there are different classes within, say, biology. I'll use biology as an example. So we have general biology for non-science major. We have general biology for science major. We have anatomy. We have physiology, microbiology. You know, there's a lot of different classes under biology. And as an adjunct, you can just teach one and develop your material and then take another one. So the more diverse classes that you can teach, the better you will in getting a full-time job. Okay, so it works both ways, right? You take your time, you develop your material, and then you start to teach more than just one specific type of classes, and that will, I think, make the applicant much more attractive if you were to go for a full-time job. So let me now go to the second question. At Mount San Antonio College, it is a huge difference between applying for an adjunct versus a full-time position. It's very competitive at Mount Sac. We are currently posting for a microbiology full-time person, and the application process has, I think, already started. It's open right now. I think it's going to close in March. But in the past, like last year, I was on the hiring committee for a general biology full-time position. We got, I think, over 100 applications, and HR pretty much ruled out maybe 20% because they didn't meet the criteria. And then we, on the hiring committee, we were looking at about 80 applications. So it's a lot more work. It's a lot more competition. Now, on the other hand, though, as adjunct, we are always hiring adjunct because a lot of our adjuncts go on to a full-time job. They're really good, and we lose them. I mean, it's great that, you know, they're moving on to a full-time job, but yeah, we have a high turnover of part-timers. Some stay with us for a long, long time, and then there are others who stay with us for, you know, maybe a few semesters, and then they land themselves a full-time job, and so we are constantly in need of part-timers. So it's easy to get started. The process, you just apply with a application, and then you come in for a quick interview, and that's it. Pretty much, you know, you either get hired or not. So it's very fast, and like I said, we're always looking for part-times at Mount San Antonio College.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. So it does definitely sound like there is a big difference between it. So I wonder if, Jamey, maybe you have any suggestions or resources on how someone might find these types of job openings, so versus, you know, adjunct versus full-time, and how could they tell if maybe that would be a good fit for them, or if they would be a good applicant for that particular job?
Okay, yes, I'm going to put a couple of URLs in the chat window here of places that are probably the best places to go to find the broadest range of jobs and job listings.
Jamey, I think maybe we can't hear you anymore. Is that true?
Ah, there we go. It muted for some reason. Is that better?
Yep.
All right, so I'm going to put a couple of these URLs in there, and these URLs are ones that most community colleges will list their job openings on, at least their full-time positions. That CCC registry is California only, and then nationwide there's one called communitycollegejobs.com that we typically use. Yeah, so these will be primarily in the US. I think there are some in Canada that post on this as well. But the CCC registry is California Community College only. But I'm going to encourage people to not just go to these websites, but also look in your local area, find the community colleges that are in your area, and go to their own website. Try to find the contact information for HR, peruse their listings, and even call their HR number. If you can't find anything, call the HR number and find what their listings are. You're going to find there people who are going to be willing to talk to you about what their hiring schedule is, when they anticipate posting new jobs. And you can find that contact information very easily just by looking for a list of local community colleges in an area that you'd like to teach. And I know if you're going to do a nationwide job search, that's really rather daunting, but a lot of people have a specific area they want to go look in, you know, a specific geographical area that they're most interested in. And you can find some top community colleges in the area with their listings and a lot more information than you'll find on these websites about those openings. So that's one thing I would definitely recommend. The other thing is, if you are looking for part-time in a specific area, a lot of times you're looking for just teaching a class while you're doing other things. Like Loni mentioned, you can contact the specific division or department itself and find out if they're hiring. That's how I got hired my first time, was that someone was just happening to find an opening, and that they happened to have somebody cancel on them, and because I was there at the right time and had the qualifications, they just hired me on the spot for the job. So very often, if you just cold call a community college department, they're going to be hiring at that moment, and if they're not, they can tell you about how to get your name in the pool for that particular college. So don't be afraid to just reach right out and put yourself in the mix. You don't have to wait for an opening to be posted on a website. And in terms of telling if a position is a good fit, you'll want to look at a job description and see if they tell you which courses that they're hiring for. Many times these departments are organized in different ways at different community colleges, so you're going to have to get to know what disciplines and what courses fall in which departments. For example, we have an odd thing here where my department, physical sciences, in my department of physical sciences, we have physics courses, but we don't have astronomy courses. And a lot of people who can teach physics can also teach astronomy, so they can go to a different department. So that's a very helpful thing to get to know. And basically, you'll have to get each website for each college to see how they're organizing themselves. There's no uniform way that we organize ourselves at these colleges. So I see someone's asked about cold calls. Is there a sort of protocol? If you can find the name of a science dean or a department chair in the area that you want, you can send them a quick little email and ask if it's okay to call them. You can attach your resume to that. but I get a lot of voicemail messages when I was chair just saying, hey, I'm in the area, I can teach this year. I'm here on a 1-year postdoc. Could I apply for a job? And I would call them back and invite them to put in an application. There was also, so I would get those calls a lot. There were people from local industry who wanted to sort of change their careers, who were interested in changing into teaching. So there was a lot of different kinds of varieties of people who would just cold call me or email me. And then some of them, they would even come in and I would meet with them personally to try and help them navigate the system. So it's okay to do that. You just find the contact information on the website and figure that out. I wrote down a couple other things here. To see if it's a good fit, you're going to want to see if the campus has specific student programs, especially for STEM students that focus on equity. Those of us who are here with CIRTL, because we're involved in this organization, this is a focus that we have, and I think we all want to make a difference in the community colleges if that's your focus of your career. So you can peruse these websites to see what kind of programs they have. As you can see, Sacha is a leader of such a program on her campus. And try to get a sense, like I said before, of how the campus organizes the courses and departments, and then try to get a sense of who the students are at that campus. Is this a campus that focuses primarily on transferring students to four-year institutions? Is it primarily a career and retraining kind of community college? Is it a technical college? Or is it like a college that focuses on business and the science classes might be only GE, there's no major science classes? Those are the kinds of things that you'll want to know when you're applying. So every community college has a different focus, and I know in different parts of the country they do change. From state to state, it's quite different. So you're going to want to get to know what the focus of each community college is before you apply, if you're going to think about if that's a good job for you or not. I think that's about it, Katie.
Awesome. Thank you, Jamey. Those are all, I was just saying, those are really great advice. So I think the focusing on what the community college goal is, I think is really important and doesn't get talked about a lot. So thank you. So Sacha, how about this? What can a graduate student or postdoc, some future faculty, do now that can help them be more competitive as an applicant for community college? What should they consider before applying? So should they try to teach part-time? Should they look for internships? What will make them competitive applicants?
So much and all of that. Yes, yes to it all. I'm excited to be talking now because I've just been vigorously nodding my head in agreement with everything that Loni and Jamey have said so far. So do all of those things, but also if you're looking to really prepare yourself to be an applicant at a community college, as Loni started off mentioning, there's a tremendous difference between the application process and the expectations for a part-time or adjunct faculty member versus a full-time faculty member who's going into a track position. So I think it's really important to kind of recognize which area you are in. It's also very uncommon, as was being mentioned earlier too, that you would go straight into a tenure track position. The expectation, I always say this because I think it's so funny and fairly hypocritical in some ways, but we're a totally open access institution for students, and for our faculty, we are incredibly snobby. We have this very strong, solid belief that if you do not have experience with our students, if you don't know our students, then you are not cut out to do this work yet. So as has been mentioned in different ways all along, and I'm sure you'll continue to hear this from all three of us, it's really important that you get to know our students and that you demonstrate your commitment to who they are, and to also their various disparate goals, because they are very different. You get all kinds of students in your classes, and that's one of the most exciting aspects of this work. So in terms of the tangible steps that you can take to be successful in being a competitive applicant, as a part-time faculty member and as a full-time faculty member, you will, as Loni was mentioning, not move forward at all if you don't have a complete application. That might sound very obvious, but so many of our fantastic applicants look at the application, don't read it carefully, don't send it in a complete format. I know we have questions on this later. I'll talk more specifically about where some of those pitfalls happen, but it's really critical that you're mindful about how you're presenting yourself, both in writing and in person. Also, if you have a connection on a community college campus, let's say maybe you were a student and you have a former faculty member that you feel comfortable reaching out to, that's what I did. I contacted the department chair, who was formerly my American literature professor, and I said, you probably don't remember me from 7 years ago, but I'm finishing up grad school and I'm really on the fence. PhD, do I want to teach at the university? I'm finishing my master's. Do I want to stop and teach at the community college? What do I do? And he said, come on in. And the vast majority of us who are faculty members at this level love to have those conversations. So most of us, even if you don't know us personally, if you reach out, the odds are very good that you're going to get someone who will give you some good feedback about what the process is like. So I'd say talk to someone you know, or talk to someone you can develop a relationship with. Also, if you have access to, it's going to sound very like I'm plugging my own program, but lots of great ones around. If you can find access to a community college faculty internship program, this is an excellent foot in the door. And as one of my former interns likes to famously say, the greatest backstage pass of all time. If you can do a program like that, you get in the classroom experience, you get in the community college experience, and you also get to have all of these great contacts on campus, so that when it comes time for you to start thinking about getting hired, they already know who you are and they're really excited about the work you've been doing, and they're excited to have you come on campus. So those are some of the things that you can do. All community colleges have really fantastic professional development opportunities. Some of those are open to the community. So I would suggest also getting in touch and seeing if there are things that you can do in that way. I'll answer those questions about internship programs because they vary dramatically in just a moment. I would say another thing that you can do that's tangible and really helpful is start getting professional development and an awareness of what equity and inclusion mean in the classroom. I am obsessed with this course that I'm taking currently that is completely free, or if you want to get certified in it, it costs $50. I sent Shannon, here it is, the link for this a little while ago. I really, really strongly recommend it. I think it's got, thank you, Shannon, a really wonderful, comprehensive view of what equitable and inclusive teaching practices look like. And that is the question I get most often from folks who are interested in teaching at this level. They'll say, I keep hearing these buzzwords, equity, inclusion, what do they mean? How do I actually do that practically in my classroom? This is a free resource that is totally self-paced that you can use to find that out. So I really recommend this, and just any kind of reading you can do, the Chronicle of Higher Education, Inside Higher Ed, those kinds of free resources are really fantastic in terms of kind of getting a sense of what's happening in the classroom at this time. Things you should consider before you apply. How much do you want to love your job? If the answer is a ton, then you should apply. Honestly, I thought it was so cheesy when I would hear people talk about when I was a grad student, the main thing is how fulfilled are you in your life? And I thought, I'll be so fulfilled when I could just pay my bills. And there was a lot of truth to that, right? But the reality is, I love this job and I love this work so much. I was on campus with a student until after 11 o'clock last night, and up this morning answering student emails before 6. And that's not, don't worry, that's not what your normal day looks like in terms of your schedule, but what I want to do, because I want to be engaging with them, working with them, helping them achieve their goals. It's so incredibly energizing to do this work. And so if you see yourself as someone who really derives a lot of personal joy and satisfaction from engaging with students, helping them achieve their goals, this is absolutely the right place for you to be.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Does anyone else have anything they want to weigh in on any of this that we didn't get a chance to mention on these 3 questions? Otherwise, we'll go to some participant questions in a second.
Actually, I'm sorry. Can I just add?
Yes, please.
Job fairs. Yeah, job fairs. I don't know where the audience is listening from, but I know that regionally, Los Angeles County, Orange County, where I'm at, we have job fairs for community college jobs. And I would highly recommend going to those events, because you will, in one place, meet with a lot of different schools, and it will cut down your work of trying to find people.
Awesome. Yeah, I definitely, some of the people I work with went to a job fair recently, and a bunch of them ended up with interviews immediately afterwards. So that's definitely really great advice to go to those. So when I'm looking through the chats here, I'm seeing a lot of questions about whether or not TA shifts or teaching at a 4-year institution counts as the kind of experience you're talking about, whether or not that's really what you want in terms of teaching experience, or are you talking specifically about adjuncting? Or are both okay?
I'm happy to jump in on that. So there are a variety of ways to handle that. I know we have an upcoming question on the CV. Because I run an internship program, I have a lot of conversations around how do I capitalize on this internship program on my CV. It is not teaching experience, but it is teaching related experience. The same is true for a TA position or a GA position. I think you need to be really careful about being honest. The worst thing that can happen to you in an interview setting is you coming in and saying, I've been a professor for 7 years. And professor to you means you have taught in a college or university, but you are not the instructor of record. The term professor has a very specific job classification and meaning at every college. And so if you come in and say that, we might be thinking, oh, awesome, you know, when did you get tenure and what has that process been like for you? And then if you come in and say, yes, you know, I'm running 1-hour study sessions every week and that's what I've been doing for 7 years, then that feels a little bit dishonest. So I think you want to be really careful to talk about teaching experience where you've been the instructor of record. Like if we were to open up the online schedule and ask students who was your teacher, we would see your name there, versus teaching related experience, which is where you can include the TA, the GA, internship, any sort of tutoring that you've done, particularly in your discipline or discipline related, that sort of material. So yes, absolutely, it will be helpful to you as you are applying for part-time positions. And as you are new to applying for full-time positions, if you just have 1 or 2 colleges in your actual teaching experience, I think it's still of great value to list your teaching related experience. Just be very transparent about the distinction between the two.
Awesome, thank you. So kind of a similar question that maybe falls along this line is, so in the terms of thinking about getting these kind of this kind of experience, Jamey, you mentioned that as a postdoc, you taught at the same time that you were going through all of your postdoc work. So as a grad student or postdoc trying to get this teaching experience, how do you balance the time? How do you know whether or not you're going to be able to dedicate the time to an adjunct position while also fulfilling your duties as a grad student?
Actually, funny story, I was applying for postdocs, but I wasn't in a postdoc. So while I was applying for postdocs is when I started teaching at a community college, and I just stopped that whole process at that point. So I never did go to get a postdoc. But in terms of balancing, it was a tough thing to balance my dissertation writing and finishing up my research and teaching, because I knew that I wasn't going to be supported in that teaching, but it was really what I wanted to do. So I think there are those internships that we were talking about, those teaching internships and the pedagogical training that's available in lots of graduate schools these days. Those things just weren't happening as much back when I was in graduate school. So I just had to go do it myself, and I just had to make a commitment to do it. But yeah, it's not an easy balance to strike, that's for sure. But if you can get involved in these internships, I think that's really the way to go while you're still in graduate school. As far as during a postdoc, that's going to depend entirely on the postdoc, and everyone's going to be different. But and this, I wanted to just jump onto this TA or GA experience question that Sacha was talking about. I think it's important to list those but make sure, like Sacha said, to distinguish those from being the primary instructor, but also it can come across very clearly, depending on how you write your application, that your TA and your GA were fundamental to your experience and decision to become a teacher. So those are really key things. So you can leverage a lot of teaching experience as a TA just to show that you did this very deliberately. It wasn't just something you were assigned and you were sort of getting time for it and getting your money from your it's because you couldn't get paid for your research during that semester, but it was an intentional act that you did to TA to try and get more experience with students. So that's what I would say about that.
Thank you so much. So thank you all for putting your questions in here. Just for the sake of time, I'm going to move on to the next section. It seems like a lot of these questions are coming up about your CV and application materials. So I think this will be a great time to address them, and then we'll come back to any that we have time for that we didn't get to talk about. So the next section is talking about preparing the application materials. So Sasha, you said that you run an internship program, so I think you're familiar with giving this kind of advice. What advice do you have on how you can tailor your CV and cover letter specifically for community college? Is that different from four-year institutions, for example? And what other documents are often required when you are applying?
Okay, so yeah, I have this conversation a lot, not just with my interns. I've got 21 of them currently, and we're in the 4th year, so I've got almost 100 total who have been through the program recently. So yes, I have this conversation constantly. I'm happy to answer specific questions. If you have them, definitely pop them up in the chat. As far as the 4-year experience is concerned, I can't speak to that because that was never even a consideration for me. It was for about 2 weeks until I decided I was going to try community college, and then literally on my first day of being in the classroom, I knew I was never ever going to go anywhere else. I loved it. So I can't tell you what the 4-year application process is like from a personal standpoint. I can tell you what I've heard anecdotally, but that might be a question better tailored to another one of our panelists here, perhaps. I will say, as far as the CV and the cover letter are concerned, I want to start with the cover letter because this is such an important document. Everything is an important document that's required in your application, but this, I think, really is your opportunity to kind of show who you are. In the same way that when you applied to grad school and were successfully accepted, it was not on a form letter style personal statement where you just said, I really look forward to coming to your institution because I love biology. You didn't do that, right? And then they were like, we can't wait to have you. Please join us. We need you here at Rutgers or wherever you went. I think it's really important to recognize that we are expecting that when you're applying to our college. You know who we are, you know who our students are, at least in theory. And so you should be looking carefully at what the desirable qualifications are in any application, because that is telling you specifically what we're looking for in an applicant, a successful applicant for that position. So the best thing that you can do for a cover letter is use that list of desirable qualifications in each application as a kind of guideline or template for creating your cover letter. I know that sounds like a lot of work. The application process is a lot of work. People are often shocked by how long it takes. I think it's really important to know that you're not going to create a successful application in an hour or two. You probably want to take several days where you amortize out the various, specific pieces of it. So as far as the cover letter is concerned, I would say at most your cover, and this is in English, I would say don't go over 2 pages. In every other discipline, because we're quite verbose, in every other discipline, I would say try to keep it to 1.5 at the very most, and not with crazy font that's miniature and requires a magnifying glass. Like, be reasonable about that. Also make sure that you're very organized, clear, hitting the desirable qualifications, and proofreading that thing over and over and over again. That's super important. You really want to come off as a polished scholar, not as someone who just threw this together. Because if your application material does not look polished and professional, the automatic assumption we're going to make is, if this is your best foot forward, what do your feet look like in the classroom, right? So you want to make sure that's really clean, polished, etc. As far as your CV is concerned, the most important thing that you're going to do is first show that you meet minimum qualifications. That's going to be the case in all parts of your application. So every single one of the applications has a list of minimum quals, and that is usually just your degrees. These are the degrees you need to have to be able to teach in this discipline at this level. So you can always start by showing your degrees and go most recent to later. We don't need to see your AA first. That's awesome. Great. You got a community college degree. We love that. But start off with your most recent educational experience and then go down from there. So reverse chronology. Then you should have your teaching experience, then your teaching related experience, and then everything else. Frankly, those are the sections that people are most frequently looking at. That's the part that we care about the most. There's so many parts of the application that when we're looking through literally thousands of pages, we are really looking to easily spot, easily pinpoint through skimming the specific areas that we really need to assure are there. So keep that in mind. Education, teaching experience, teaching related experience, and then whatever you want after that. Really, whatever. Other documents that are typically required, oh my gosh, I can tell you that that varies even within departments and within colleges. Everybody's got a different idea about this, and it's actually the individual hiring committees who can make those decisions. So you may have a bio position now that looks like a totally different set of recommendations and requirements from a bio position 2 years ago at the same college. And I think that that's that's really important. You really want to be attuned to, again, what they're asking for. One thing I can tell you that will help you save time in this process is that we are actually not allowed to look and judge any material that you include that is not a required part of the application. So for example, a common thing that I see is people get really on fire about teaching statements, you know, like this is my teaching philosophy, or this is my statement of diversity. If you're asked for that, awesome. Totally do it. Make sure it's excellent and send it in. If you are not asked for that, do not waste your time writing that. Same deal with letters of reference. I will open up applications sometimes that have 25 letters of reference. We didn't even ask for any letters of reference. So now you have just wasted all of your time adding in material that we are actually not even allowed to look at. So it's really important for your time saving and also for economizing the process for your reviewers who are tired. It's not like we get paid a lot of money to sit around and review applications or even do the hiring process. It's a lot of extra work that we do because we care. We want to make sure that great people get in our departments, work with us, work with our students, but we don't want to have all of this extra material just for the heck of it. So please keep that in mind too. Other documents that you might see, the most important one I will tell you is not a separate document, but an actual part of the online application in most cases. That is the supplemental questions. One of the biggest application errors I see on the regular is people writing CCV or C cover letter. Or, this is another favorite of mine, copying and pasting sections from other parts of their application into those answers. This is a terrible idea, my friends. We have to evaluate each one of those supplemental questions individually. And so if your answer to supplemental question 1 on how you create an equitable and inclusive classroom environment is CCV, then I have to give you points for your comment CCV. I can't actually go look at your CV and find out what you're talking about. I literally have to grade that. So it's really important that you take each aspect of the application very seriously. Don't assume, oh my gosh, this again, I've already answered this in 10 different ways. Well, it's time to answer it in way number 11. You know, it's like you just have to kind of go through the hoops to make sure that that happens, because you may have people who really value what you say in one area versus another. You don't want to be taking the opposite one as seriously as you should. So I think the supplemental questions, definitely completing the application. As I mentioned, sometimes you do have requirements for a diversity statement. I know at a panel we just all did together, Jamey was mentioning that you have now a requirement for the diversity statement. Some of our departments do too. The teaching philosophy statement, that's also a pretty common requirement in some spaces. The letters of recommendation are becoming a less common requirement, which I am utterly in favor of, because I think that they tremendously privilege people who are immediately in graduate school or who graduated like a year ago. And folks who have been out of graduate school, what are you going to do? Contact your professor from 25 years ago and say, do you remember my research? I know you don't. Could you still write me a letter of rec? It's not the most ideal situation. Or if you're switching jobs, maybe you don't want to tell your current employer that you are looking somewhere else, and so it can be really challenging too. Because of those reasons and more, letters of rec are becoming a less common requirement, but they do still exist in some spaces. You want to make sure that this is not just some big name. You want a person who can really speak to your skills specifically, who will answer the phone and who will respond to email, and who's going to follow through for you. I've gotten some really threatening statements from folks in the past few months because I have so many interns. I'm constantly doing reference checks. Things like, if you don't respond to this email in 72 hours, this, by the way, is the initial email. I need to do a reference check for so-and-so for this position for a full-time tenure-track job. If you don't respond to this email within 72 hours, the applicant will not move forward in the process. I mean, I'm really responsive, so I'm on that. But if one of your former faculty members or someone, a contact of yours, receives that and they're not really fast on their email, now you're out of the process for that. Just be really mindful of who you're including as your references too, okay? There's a lot of other stuff to say in this space. So if there are specific documents that you all have questions about, or things that you've seen that you maybe aren't fully clear on what they mean, please feel free to pop those up in the chat. But those are the heavy hitters that I see pretty regularly.
Thank you so much, Sasha. So much information. That's so helpful, and it's really good to know these things before you spend all this time and effort trying to get the documents together. So thank you. We have a lot of great questions specific to this in the chat, which we'll try to come back to. But before we get to that, I want to move on to this next question. So Loni and maybe Jamey, who I believe we've both been on hiring committees, what stands out to you in an application, and what are some common mistakes that people make? What are some things that are frequently left out? And so I know Sacha mentioned a few. Are there any others you can think of?
Okay, I'll go. Yes, whatever Sasha said is great information. So in the interest of time, I'm not going to repeat it. I will emphasize that every school will be different. So please be mindful and read the instructions, read whatever criteria, requirements that they're looking for, and tailor your application so that it fits exactly. Remember, we are reviewing like a lot of application voluntarily. We do not get extra time off. We don't get paid extra. So we're doing this, and if you're not clear on your application, if you are missing stuff, if I have to go and hunt for stuff, that's not going to sit well with me. And I'm like, I'm not going to bother. So I'm going to rate you low. So therefore, I would say however the job description was written, use those exact same keywords. You know, let's say if they wanted you to explain equity, well, use the word equity. Don't use another word that you think means the same thing, because I'm looking for equity, and if I can't find equity, mistakes I would say is a lot of people will just do a one size fit all. And we can tell when we look at an application like, oh, you're missing this, because you're trying to do the same application to all these different institutions, and we're different. We're asking for different things, so that does not work well. Something else that stands out for me is I want to see that passion. Why do you want to teach? You know, that makes a big deal for me, in addition to the experience that you already have. So yeah, like I said, I'm gonna end it there, and then I'll let Jamey take over.
Okay. Yeah, so everyone said some really good stuff. I would just want to emphasize again for everybody to please read the description of the job and the qualifications, both required and preferred qualifications, and make sure that you put those in a really organized way in your cover letter. The point that Loni just made about equity too, this becomes more and more a qualification that's called out in job descriptions, and if you don't mention that in your cover letter, then that's a big deal. We just had a physics process where that happened, and only about 10% of the applicants mentioned it, even though it was listed as one of the qualifications for the job. And if they don't have a specific equity statement or a statement of teaching philosophy, but they mention that as part of the qualifications, you're going to need to tell your story in your cover letter somehow. And so that's what we're really looking at. People have been asking about 4-year teaching experience, about research and publication lists. What stands out in these is all of that has to be fitting into cohesive story about why you want to teach at a community college, which is very different than teaching at a 4-year school or teaching in a graduate school in a research institution. So there needs to be a really coherent story that you're telling that comes across through the CV, through the cover letter, through the letters of recommendation if they come up, that if it's garbled or if it doesn't match the job description, your application may be put aside. So that's what I wanted to basically say. The mistakes I'm listing here: attaching pages and pages of student evaluations or other documents that were not solicited, like your research plan. That would be bad. But you can include a publication as long as it's part of a story of how you got your qualifications, right? So just be really judicious about that. Also, people putting in boilerplate language around teaching philosophy and equity, that stands out as a real strong negative. And if you have generic language that seems like it doesn't match a community college but could be for a 4-year college or a research position, it just doesn't look good. So we would like to see that you really want to teach at a community college when you put together your application. All right, for the reason of time, I'll just stop there.
Thank you. Those are all extremely important points. And so some of the things that came up in the chat that I want to address now before we move on is, how much do you emphasize your research in your publication list? So how much of that do you put into your CV and cover letters?
I can answer that just from the standpoint of having looked at a lot of these. I definitely, if you've done a lot of research, please tell us about it and what it was like and what it meant to you. But attaching multiple pages of papers, that's probably not a good idea. But it's nice to know what your area of emphasis was, because sometimes there's a position that is specific to a certain area. For example, when we were hiring physics, we specifically needed people who had ability to teach electricity and magnetism and modern physics. And so if someone had research in that area, we know that they would be a really good candidate for that kind of a position. But that's the context in which it needs to be. We don't need to hear about what your future research plans are, because that's not going to happen at a two-year college. So I would say that just be very balanced about it.
Yeah, I want to add to that too. I totally agree with what Jamey is saying. I think it's really important for you to kind of highlight what your strengths are academically, but I also think there's a very delicate balance between I want to teach at a community college because that's my end game and I'm very devoted to these students and I really want to teach, versus this is my stepping stone to a 4-year position and I really am about the research. And so sometimes we get applications, I'm sure you do too, Jamey, and I'm sure you do too, Loni, where the whole application is basically like research, 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 and I'll teach in the meantime. That is not going to get you far at all in our hiring environment. So just really be mindful of that. Like, this is what I can bring to the classroom. Here is how I see this functioning in these classes I'm excited to teach with community college students.
Thank you. So I want to move on to this third question very quickly. Maybe, Loni, you could answer for us is, what is the process and timeline for how you review your applications, and about how many do you usually get for each position? And everyone else can feel free to chime in afterwards also.
Okay, I want to make a distinction between the adjunct position versus the full-time. For us, adjunct position, we are always hiring. So we may call you in, say in a month or in a week. It depends on if there's a need. We schedule our classes a year in advance. So this is fall. This is what, spring 2020 right now. We are going to be giving out classes to adjuncts probably at the end of spring for the fall semester. So what happened is, if there are any classes that does not get filled, then we dip into our adjunct pool and start making a bunch of calls and inviting people in to interview. So if you're submitting the application right now and we don't have a need because all of our spring classes are filled, we may not get to you until this summer. Okay, but if you submit your application in June, well, you might get a call within a few weeks because we're looking to fill classes for fall. Okay, so that's part-time. And the process at MouseSAC is fairly straightforward. There's an application, and you submit it with whatever requirements. I believe we asked for letters of recommendations, a cover letter, and then the MouseSAC application. The department chair will call you for an interview if you meet our criteria. And the interview is usually a panel of 2 to 3 faculty members. And it is pretty, to me, it's pretty benign in that it's more of like just trying to get to know you, trying to get to know if you're a good fit, if you can teach. And of course, there is a teaching demonstration, and we tell you the topic ahead of time. And then at the end, if everything looks good, everything sounds good, then we do a reference check. And if the reference checks looks good, then we offer you the person the position to teach a specific class. Okay, so that's the part-time. Full-time, that's a totally different ball game. Full-time, we have a certain opening date and a certain closing date. HR will look at all the applications we got by the closing date, and they will screen out anyone that has incomplete applications or for some reason has not met our minimum qualification. The remaining application will then be forwarded to the committee. And the committee at MouseSAC, we have a committee of about 7 to 8 people. We have a combination of administrator like our dean. We have faculties. We have a the equal opportunity. So to make sure that there's no favoritism, we're not asking anything that we should not be asking. And there's an HR person on the panel. So it could be intimidating. So all of us, we review all of the applications that has been given to us by HR, and we rank them. We rate the applications on, you know, the criteria that we set out in the application calling. So then we meet and we figure out who we want to invite to interview. Now, usually for a full-time position, we will invite about a dozen to come in. Not, you know, so it's usually over 2 days that we interview. We will call these people and let them know, hey, you're invited to an interview. Here's the topic you should prepare for the teaching demonstration, and then, you know, 2 days, 2 solid days, we are sitting there interviewing one after another after another. At the end of that interview process, we then decide who we want to send forward to the second round of interview with the VP or the president of the campus. And that at that point, we only send about 2 or 3 applications forward. So it gets narrower, but it gets way more competitive. And then the administrator, either the vice president of instruction or the president, along with the one of the person on the committee, they make the final decision as who they're going to offer the position to. Sometimes the VP or the president say, no, I don't like any of these 2 or 3 applicants you sent me. You got to start all over. That's been known to happen too. So that's the here at Mount SAC, that's what it takes for a full-time position. And in terms of how many, gosh, like I said, you know, the general biology position, we had about 80 applications to review, whereas the microbiology is just something that's very, very specific. I think we have about 20 applications to review, so it varies. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. So it definitely sounds like there's a big difference between those 2 processes, and for sure the full-time sounds a bit more involved. So I, again, am loving all these questions in the chat. We wish we had time to get to all of them, but thank you so much, Sacha and Jamey, for responding to some of them as we go. I do want to just bring up one before we move on, and very briefly, the question is, who should you put as a reference, or who might work as a good reference to put? Should it be your advisor with your research, or should it be someone you've met through teaching?
Okay, I'm glad that you brought that one up, because that was going to be where I was going next. I'm trying to go through the backlog, so I'm sorry if I'm missing you. And I think Jamey and I are trying to like attack the chat as much as we can right now, get all of your questions answered. So thanks for helping on that. I think as far as your references are concerned, you especially want folks, if you have taught in any capacity and someone has evaluated you, not a student. I loved that comment, Jamey. Oh my gosh, those evals, we do not need to see that. Congratulations, but keep it to yourself. If you have department chair evaluations or a mentor who has seen you teach, something like that, you want someone who can talk specifically about your interactions with students and how you're involved with them in the classroom. So if you have folks like that who are reliable resources, I would really strongly recommend including them in your list of resources. And then also, if you are, especially if you are in grad school now, or you are very recently graduating, you can definitely have someone who's very familiar with your work talk about you and how you interact as a student. So again, someone responsive who can talk specifically about you, ideally about teaching.
Great, thank you. So I want to move on to our last section here, which is the interview process. So let's say you go through all of this application, you put everything in, you get a call back. What happens? So maybe Loni and then Sacha, if there's time, could you share a few common questions that a candidate might get asked in that interview? And what are you looking for in the responses? What are some of the themes that you want to hear about?
Okay, you should expect the usual, right? Tell us about yourself. Why do you want to teach at a community college? Explain, you know, your experience. So make sure you include your teaching background as well as professional development. If in grad school, have you done professional development regarding teaching, definitely include that in the answer. We also have scenarios. Oh, and by the way, this is a full-time position. in a full-time position, we often give you a scenario so that one of the person on the committee will pose as a student, and you would be the faculty member, and we will give you some kind of situation just to see how you will respond at that point in time. Let's see. Another question would be just, let's say in biology, we have lecture and lab. Like how would you coordinate, or let's say the student came to you, your teaching lab, and came to you and said, hey, I heard from the lecturer that something totally different than what you just said. How will you deal with that? Okay. Another possible scenario would be you gave your first test and half the class failed the test. What are you going to do? Okay, so all these questions, for us, we're trying to figure out how comfortable you are, how familiar you are, and how well you respond to very common occurrences that may happen. So, we just want to see, like I said, your experience and how comfortable you are with answering these questions.
Okay, thank you. I want to ask maybe Sacha or Jamey, are there topic-specific questions? Like if you want to teach chemistry, for example, are you going to get asked chemistry questions, or is it mostly just about your teaching and your interactions with students?
Oh yeah, you're gonna get, in the first level, you're gonna get that because your first level interview is with primarily members of the department. So we need to make sure that just because you have your degree does not mean that you just sort of happen to get that degree, but you can't do math. That happens sometimes. So we typically will have, I've sat on a bunch of different departments, but I'm going to use English because that's a common one that I'm on since that's where I'm a full-time faculty member. We will ask someone to come in and actually do an interactive sort of role-playing activity where I'm the upset student because I failed my essay, and then you're my teacher, and so how are you going to talk through that essay with me? And we're looking to see not only the student interaction, the student-instructor interaction, but we also want to see if you can talk about an essay effectively. I know math constantly, and this happens in our chem department too, they give problems all the time, and then the applicants have to actually solve them and explain them. So they basically will role play and say, okay, so we're all going to be students in your class. And one student says, I don't understand how this problem comes out to this answer. I really don't get that, and you didn't show us how to do it. So there's like a little bit of antagonism in that, which I always think is hilarious. We have a good time on these committees. Sometimes we have to keep ourselves going for like 8 or 10 or 25, hours of this. So, but we also want to see, like, how do you interact under pressure in your discipline? Do you have the skills to be able to do this? It is absolutely highly likely that at least at the first level, you will have discipline-specific questions. And then, of course, you will have, I know this is an upcoming question, a teaching demo that is discipline-specific too. And we're always looking to see the kind of choices that you make there. So I'll hold off on that for just a minute.
Thank you. So, Jamey, actually, why don't you talk to this question of how should candidates prepare for a teaching demo, and is there one? It sounds like there is going to be.
Yes.
And do they typically know if there's the topic ahead of time, or do they get it right away?
Okay, so both is the short answer. Yes, you will probably, most people will have to have a teaching demo, and at a community college, this kind of substitutes for what a lot of you might have been familiar with at a four-year research institution where prospective faculty members walk around and chat with everyone for a day. This is your way to show the committee how you are in front of students. And in many instances now, we have students in the room during that interview process. So you should be prepared for that, that might occur. But even if it doesn't occur, you should assume that that's how you're presenting the material, because we really need to get a sense of how you speak with students and what it's like to have you as an instructor. This is not about any content area questions that you have, whether you know about them in advance or whether you don't know about those content area questions in advance. You should not approach them as if this is like an advanced candidacy or an oral exam for your master's or doctoral programs. Instead, you should approach those kinds of questions like, how do I approach teaching this to a group of students at a community college? That's how we want to see this. So we want to see your culture, your your cultural competency in the classroom, we want to see your pedagogical competency, and we also want to see your content area expertise all really neatly meshed together. That's what we really want to see. So you may know some of the topics ahead of time, and usually if there's a longer teaching demo, you'll be able to prepare that. My advice on that is don't go overboard and monitor the time that they give you. That is going to be a key thing. They will cut you off if you're over time. And then if you have this teaching demo and then they may ask you to come in advance, if they're asking you to come in advance of the interview for an hour or half an hour, that probably means there's a series of questions they want you to answer when you arrive. So just be aware of that. And again, take the approach that this is not like an oral exam in graduate school. Everything is focused on the demonstration of your classroom skill.
Thank you. So definitely sounds like at a teaching institution, teaching demo is going to be one of the most important things. So kind of last here, maybe if all of you want to speak on it, maybe Loni or Sacha, what are some of the reasons a candidate who goes through the interview, so they've maybe made it through the rest of the application process, might not get hired? Or more growth mindset, why might they get hired if they go through this interview? What's a good thing? So what are common mistakes or things that maybe stand out?
Okay, well, there are lots of reasons, and you need to know going into this process that it is a little bit like acting. It feels very, very personal when you don't get selected. You put yourself out there and it's just you, and it's all your whole self, right? You as a teacher, you as a person, all of these different aspects of you. So this is a process that requires you to build a little bit of a thicker skin, and if you don't have that coming in, you need a really good support system until you build it. So you should know that. We have many, many, many wonderful candidates. You, as was mentioned earlier, may be going against literally hundreds of candidates. And so the fact that you have a first level interview is already something that you should be really, really proud of. I know that sounds cheesy, but it is true. It's a huge deal that you're in that space. And so I always tell my interns to look at those interviews as an opportunity for growth in the interview process, not as the next step toward the job. The more you interview, the better you're going to get at it. I would say one of the things that I hear come up very, very often in interviews is they didn't answer all the questions. That's really common. We are so thoughtful about the way that we ask questions, which questions we have time to ask you, how we expect you to answer them. If we ask you a two-part question and you only answer one part of it, we only can give you half credit for that answer. And so it's very common that we'll have people who are incredibly charismatic or who are so powerful on paper, but they'll come into the room and be really unprepared. You need to study for the interview and plan and prepare so thoroughly. If you don't do that, it's really obvious. You should also know a lot about the college. Sometimes we'll get applicants who are really fantastic, but they come in and they talk so much about the college where they have been, but not in the context of here's what I'm doing now and here's how I see that translating to your college. Instead, it's, well, over here, I'm doing this and this and this and this, and there's nothing about here. What makes you want to be here? So that's another area. I mean, not answering the questions fully or thoughtfully, or here's my favorite one, with specific examples. A candidate who's able to come in and give at least one really meaty specific example per question is so much more compelling than a candidate who answers in general terminology, which we hear a lot. Someone asked a question about like their level of passion in a cover letter. I think we're really looking to see who you are as a human. And if you come in and you're like quite stoic the entire interview, we understand nervousness. We've all been on the other side of the table. We understand what the process is like, but we want to get to know you a little bit. And if your walls are so thick, or if you talk about students in a way that is, this is going to sound like an obvious who would ever do that, but I will tell you it happens constantly. If you talk about students in a way that is degrading or disparaging, or in a way that makes it sound like it's only their responsibility and that you don't play a role in the institution doesn't play a role in their success, that's problematic. This again is where that really looking into and doing some research around equity and inclusion, and also what the campus is doing to support students. I think Jamey was mentioning this early on in our talk today. all of those aspects are going to really come in and help you out. Reasons that people do get hired is because they do those things. They answer the questions really thoroughly. They know the college that they're applying to. They have genuine passion for this work. You get the sense from them that this is not just a job, that they're not going to phone it in, that they can't imagine doing anything different with themselves, that this is where they have to be, and this is why they love it, and these are the examples of how they've already been doing it.
Thank you.
Hey, I totally agree with what Sacha says, and I just want to add that oftentimes people get way too nervous and it doesn't come out clear, especially in the teaching demonstration. I've seen part-time faculty who I know does a really good job when I am just evaluating the person, but in the interview, they get really stressed out and they blow the interview. So I recommend, if you know of faculty members who are not on the hiring committee, ask them if they will do a mock interview with you. And oftentimes they might say yes. Like, I have done mock interview with some of our part-timers just to get them ready because I'm not on the hiring committee. Number two, feel free to think about some of these questions ahead of time and jot down your answers and bring those answers with you, because you don't know what question will be asked. But if you have already thought about the questions and have already put your answers down, you just got to go find it, and it's a lot less stressful. It's almost like a security blanket, because if you were to freeze during the interview, you say, okay, I know where to find this, and we'll be okay, you know, because we know you're nervous. So feel free to bring things in. For MouseSAC, we cannot accept any new documentations at the interview, but you can certainly bring in the file folder of everything that you've done, just so that you can refer to it and jog your memory to kind of lower that anxiety curve, if you will.
I have a couple things to add here to this. I'm glad that both of you guys hit a lot of the topics that I had listed for myself. One of the things that came up in terms of why candidate might have a problem with during their interview that would keep them from getting hired is if they plan to do their teaching demo in a specific format and that format did not work in the room that the interview took place in. You should have multiple ways to communicate your teaching demo, including electronic versions of slides, computer or markers or handouts, and you should have backups of different ways to do things so that you can get through your demo no matter what happens in the room. The second thing is, don't feel that you're forced to cover an entire teaching demonstration topic if it's very broad. Instead, choose to cover a specific area and show off your teaching style, and then have a handout for the remainder of the material that you can pass out to the committee. Just to show that you understand the broad implications of that topic area. So that there's ways to get around that. But the last thing we want is you to get a third of the way through the teaching demo and stop in the middle before you get anywhere. That can be a really bad thing that happens. Let's see. I think that's basically it. I'm really glad Sacha said something about how you speak about students and thinking about that in advance. That is generally one of the big drawbacks that happens during an interview. You bring someone in, their application looks really great, and then they make a broad generalization about a class of students in front of the entire committee, and you can just feel the air come out of the room at that moment. So think really carefully about how you're going to talk about students. I mean, it comes across in those moments how you feel about students who are, you know, you might have a question about how do you handle struggling students, and a lot of instructors will start making very general comments about broad classes of students at that moment. And so you want to really think really carefully about that and what your teaching philosophy is, and sort of get a sense of it and put it in context of equity. Do some study, do some work on your own about that in advance, so that you can speak really fluently about that in the interview process. Okay.
Thank you. This has all been so helpful, and I hope we've been able to answer a lot of your questions. And again, thank you for communicating with the participants in the chat. I do want to go back to a couple of questions, and I know we don't have a lot of time, but one of the questions that kind of seems to be popping up a lot is advice on how you highlight different things in your application, or how you talk about language, and you know, talking about your passion versus having like a cold language. That could be a whole nother webinar in and of itself. Are there resources that you could recommend on where we can find ways to learn ways to talk about those different things, or get example CVs or something like that? Anybody think of any? That's a hard question, right? They're so hard to find.
Okay, I'll take it. I think the main thing is you have to practice. Get a community together of people. This is one of the benefits of being in an internship program, because like Loni was saying, that you're doing this with your own part-time faculty. I do that too, but I also do it with my interns in a much more robust, like full semester long mock interview situation where we're doing a lot of peer reviewing of each other's information. I think the most important piece of advice I can give all of you about this process is you do you. Don't try to be somebody else. Often I see candidates come in, like Loni was saying, and they'll be like these incredible teachers, but then they come in the room and they're so freaked out by the interview process, or they're so underprepared that they think, okay, well, it seems like a lot of the really, you know, successful faculty in this department are very energetic. And so even though I'm a pretty even keel person, I'm now very energetic. And it comes off as like incredibly bizarre. So I think, you know, kind of know what your strengths are. Do a lot of practicing. Video yourself. It's painful, but do it. Video yourself and then watch it back. Do I seem ridiculous? Am I throwing my hands around all the time? I had one intern whom I used to crack up about. She would go into, if you're a yogi, full eagle pose, basically, sitting in her chair. So she would wrap her arms all the way around herself, get them under her chin, and then you can't see my legs now, but they would wrap up too. She would be in this tiny little ball right before answering her question. She would just continue to close in on herself. So like, what is happening with your body language? Your writing and your in-person should have a similar vibe. So don't have a tone in your cover letter and your CV and all of that information that's so off the grid of who you are as a person. If you are more heel, then you can demonstrate your passion as you would in any normal circumstance. Also, if a department doesn't like you, it's kind of like dating. It's like rejection is protection. Consider yourself protected. You know, like they know their department. You are not exactly the right fit for it, but that's okay. There's another department out there that's great for you, and vice versa. So just know that too. Don't try to mold yourself so much to what you think the department wants. You really need to come in there and say, this is, I mean, don't put it all out, but this is primarily who I am. And I'm so excited to learn from and with you and to be really adaptable in the classroom. Here's what I can offer. Don't try to come in and pigeonhole yourself into this persona you think that they want. I think I answered that question kind of more from the side than maybe you were looking for, Katie, but in terms of these resources, I would be really careful about these kinds of like advice on how to write your CV, because everyone's got a different perspective on that, because everyone's a different person, right? The way I interview is very high energy because I am always very high energy. I would never try to chill myself out. It's not possible. And you shouldn't do the opposite, you know? So I think it's just really, really important to be authentically you in all of these spaces.
Thank you, Sasha. That's actually really great advice. Everyone wants a simple answer, right? But it's really dependent on who you are and what the position is. So I saw a really great question kind of just pop up about a phone interview. So that might be a whole different ballgame. Jamey, I saw you answered a little bit, but would you mind talking a bit more about phone interviews and how you should handle those versus an in-person one? What might be a difference?
Yeah, we've seen more and more of this happening, especially somebody asked a question a long time ago, and I forgot who it was, about applicants from other parts of the country or other parts of the world, and if there's an advantage or disadvantage of being local. And I would say absolutely not in the full-time hiring process. Obviously, for part-time hiring, it helps if you're local, because sometimes I've hired part-timers the week before classes start. And when I was chair, every now and then, you know, we'd have a faculty member get sick or ill or go on leave, and you need someone at the last minute. So it can be that can be a very different thing. But for full-time, you've got people from all over the world applying, and there's really we don't make any distinction between where you're coming from. But that does tend to cause some problems for students, for for the applicants coming to you for an interview process. So if they often have a phone interview, just try and screen out some of the applicants first from far away, and then they will help, HR might help pay for part of your plane ticket if you go on to the next round. So this, more and more people are exploring the idea of having Skype interviews, in which case you could even do a teaching demo over Skype. So, you know, if you had Blackboard or something like that, you could teach through that, or Canvas. But if it's just a screening on the phone, my guess is that that would just be an expansion on qualifications to see how well you talk about your qualifications and see if it really matches what was in your application, and also to talk about your teaching philosophy and how you handle certain interactions inside the classroom. So everything we've been saying really applies there, because you'll be getting questions like that in that round as well. So yeah, I think that's what I would say about the phone interviews. But if you're having a hard time getting to your interview, you can always ask if they do Skype, and a lot of places are being willing to do Skype or Zoom interviews these days.
Thank you so much. So we're almost out of time. I do want to ask a very quick question of, it sounds like having almost not a mentor, but somebody in the community college system who can give you feedback might be helpful. Do you know how you might be able to find someone that you could talk to, or are people open to that usually, or is that something difficult to find? I don't know who might be able to speak on that.
I'll go first. Yes, so at Mount SAC, we have a very large biology department. We have over 20 full-time faculty, and I would say like most of us would probably be able to answer some questions over the phone, or if not in person. So my best guess would be talk to the department chair, explain that you are trying to, get information about working at Mount SAC in the biology department. Then he can maybe refer you to someone who would be willing to talk to you further. So just touch base with the department chair. If you are in the area, just drop by. Drop by. We usually have office hours, especially during like middle of the day, business hours. One of us will be here office hour, and you just drop by and knock on the door, say, "Hey, I'm so and so," and just chat. I think majority of faculty are very helpful. They want to help, and they are more than open to answering questions. So either by email or in person, contact the chair, and the chair should be able to direct you to the right person.
Thank you. So we're pretty much out of time. So just for the panelists, very quickly, any last thing that you want to give advice about? Anything we didn't get to talk about today that you wanted to bring up? Loni, how about you? Do you have anything in particular?
I just say good luck and reach out. We are here to help as much as possible. I can't speak for everyone, but I know my colleagues. I know they are helpful, and don't be shy.
Thank you. How about Sasha, anything?
Yeah, totally agree. You can find an internship that's local to you and you can make that work with your schedule, or even if you can't, I mean, that's another avenue for finding a mentor. Contact the person who's in charge of that and say, look, I can't do this with my schedule, but do you have any contacts in this department at this college who might be interested in working with me? That's a great resource, in addition to department chairs who are variably very helpful and not. It just kind of depends, of course. And I would say too, Shannon posted that link for me earlier. I can't suggest that or something like it enough. Really start to do that work in equity and inclusion, especially if you don't have your own classes yet. Start to get a sense more about what the theories are behind how this actually looks in practice in the classroom, not just from books and not just from anecdotal information.
And Jamey, thank you.
Yeah, so I would say, in addition to what these are all good advice, I would say spend some time on a community college campus, spend some time with a community college student, and just think about what the what it's like at those campuses. You're going to get a sense of the difference by talking to a student more than you're going to be than if you talk to a faculty member or a department chair. You'll get one sense from the department chair, but if you kind of know what an environment is like, it is different than what you think it is, probably, if you've never spent time there. So I would definitely say, if you didn't go to community college yourself, if you've never been on a campus, go to a campus and see how it's different.
Thank you. I want to thank you all so much for all of this wonderful information. It sounds like it's been very helpful. It's been very helpful for me as well, hearing about all your different stories. So thank you everyone for participating. I hope you also find it helpful. This is kind of our contact information. Feel free to contact me. I don't know if the panelists are also comfortable with that, but we have their information up here. But please feel free to reach out. I just posted our website link in the chat, and so feel free to go on there, sign up for a newsletter or something like that. But again, please contact me. I can get you in touch with a lot of the different resources we talked about today, including some of our other internship programs across the country. So thank you again, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.